So first off, I want to give you an update report. I managed less this week. I wasn't great at it, but I was better. And better is better. That's right. That's right. Also, I've had a few people come up to me and say, I really wish you'd quote Ernest Holmes more. And I just wanted you to know that that's not what I do. And that there is another center that does do that, and this center isn't for everybody, right? And it's really important to find a community that works for you. So I just wanted to be clear that what I do is bring my experience of what is happening in my life with the spirituality that I am putting into practice. And that's what I want to bring to you, and that's what this center is about, because we are about the experiential of what we bring forth in our actual lives, and that's really important to me. And so that's what I'm building this community on. That's what a lot of us are building this community on, is the essential actuality of what is impacting our lives today. Open at the top. For those of you who do want to hear more about Ernest Holmes, there's actually going to be another class on the history of science of mind being offered shortly in April. And anyone who wants to become a practitioner, well, that class is mandatory. And for those of you who want to just find out more about the beginnings of our movement, that would be a great class for you, and that starts in April. So I just wanted to get clear on what we are and what we are not, because not every community is for everybody, right? And so I thought I just wanted to be clear about that, because I love you guys and I want you to be here, but I also want to make sure that I continue to be completely authentic with you about what's true for me now, not was or in the past or whatever. So this week, what I've been thinking a lot about is something called the essential. Like, what is really essential in life? Like, for instance, air. Air seems to be really essential. I have not met anybody who could hold their breath forever, who's walking around not needing air, not needing oxygen. So it looks to me like air is pretty essential. There was a time back in Asheville, I think about almost 30 years ago now, where John Waterhouse and I caught this bug. And part of what happened was our throats would close. And the first time it happened, I heard from John and Barbara, his wife, that what happened to him is he simply went unconscious. So his wife had to deal with the fact that he couldn't breathe. I wasn't that lucky. I didn't go unconscious. All of a sudden, I'm sitting there not being able to breathe, having no idea what just happened or how long this would last. And at first, I freaked out, as you might. But then I realized I needed to calm down and see what I could do about this. And finally, I can't, it felt like hours. All right? But I'm sure it was just like seconds. I could breathe again. And this happened for over 2 weeks. That at odd moments when I least expected it, I could not breathe. I got really clear on the essential nature of breathing. Okay? So there's that. There's water. I've gone 5 days without water. I wouldn't want to go any longer. I wouldn't recommend going any longer. Water seems pretty essential. There's food. I've gone 14 days without food. I wouldn't recommend going much longer. But it seems like we really don't get to continue to exist if we don't eat. So it seems pretty essential. Then it comes to shelter. Now, shelter is interesting because it really depends on where you live in the world, how essential shelter is. Here in Edmonton, it's essential. It gets cold here. But there are places in the world where it's not. So this is where the line starts to shift, and there's this thing called it depends, right? All of a sudden, the line starts to shift. Now it depends. Then there's love. And Bob was the one who brought up love. I hadn't actually thought of that one until he mentioned it yesterday. And I said, oh yeah, love. Yeah, I think that's pretty essential. And I was thinking about how what we need is self-love, a spiritual love. Like where we spend most of our time is trying to get love from somebody else. When the essential part is actually how much are we hooked into what Sue was sharing about in our spiritual mind treatment, where the first step is there's only one. And if you're really hooked into there's only one, I mean really hooked into it, where you're feeling it, you are feeling love. I do, right? When I'm hooked in on that level. And I'm not saying that we clearly like being loved by others and being in community and doing and this. I'm just talking about what's essential. Because that's what struck me this week. Is what is truly essential. Because they talk about it a lot in the Zen writings that I read every day. They talk a lot about the essential, and it just got me thinking, so what really is? Right? And so as I was looking at this, it led me to, so how does that relate to quality of life? How does the essential relate to our quality of life? What really is a high quality of life? And it occurred to me that this week, as I was sitting with all this, that what really strikes me as a high quality of life is when I'm feeling really good about myself, when I'm feeling free from the trappings of what it is that others or even in my own mind might think I need. You know, like for instance, health, right? A lot of people say health is essential. Well, go talk to a guy named Murray. And I'm not talking about our Murray. I'm talking about a guy who was in a book called Tuesdays with Murray. Maury. Tuesdays with Maury. I'm from New York, man. Maury. He had Lou Gehrig's disease. He was at a point where he was in a wheelchair, and over time what happens with this particular disease is you lose your ability to breathe because you're losing all your functions. And there was this guy who went and visited him week after week, and Maury spoke about the quality of his life even then and what really mattered, and it wasn't about his body. There's a ton of gurus who have died of cancer, and my personal belief about that is because they didn't care about their physical health, they cared about their spiritual health because that's what gave them a high quality of life. Now, am I up here saying you should do that too? Heck no, I'm never going to shit on you. We get to pick for ourselves, each and every one of us, what is a high quality of life for us as individuals. But it's really in the spiritual realm, right? I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking about how often we buy into our ego idea about what a high quality of life is. I, at one point in my life, sold insurance. And when I first got the job, one of the most interesting things they said to me at the job interview is that after you leave us, we're only going to continue paying you for 2 years. And I sat there going, I'd never heard of such a thing. Only you're going to pay me after I leave this job? That sounded incredible to me. And only 2 years, I was like, that sounds great. You know, I never even heard of that kind of thing. So it was this incredible thing, and I worked there 3 years, and I made a boatload of money, and so for the next 2 years, they paid me more than I could have ever spent, and so I was able to write a novel and travel and do all this stuff that I didn't even know was possible, except they kept sending me checks, and they were large checks, and it was fantastic. And I thought, this is an incredible life, except I didn't think that. I found myself, I had spent all of my early days thinking the one thing I needed to be happy in this world was freedom. And the way I thought of freedom then was financial freedom. And so there I found myself in the town of Asheville, North Carolina, looking out at this beautiful, beautiful, gorgeous view. And I broke down crying because I was so miserable. I was so unhappy. I had this wife and kid and this magnificent house and all this stuff, and I was miserable. And it made me realize that what I had thought was a high-quality life wasn't for me. I had bought into what others had told me would give me joy, would give me hope, would give me a sense of wonder, and none of that happened. And so it got me looking for, I need to find what this is. Where is it? How do I find that quality of life that others talk about? And then I started looking into other people who looked like they had a high quality of life and actually discovered that many of them didn't. Just because they had a lot of money, just because they traveled, just because they did this or that, they were as miserable as everybody else. So what is it? What is it really that can give us that sense of quality? Last week I spoke about Paul Giazzo and Ananta Krante, who found that quality in the midst of situations that do not sound high quality at all. And yet they found that. So I go back to the essential, because I look at them, they're my heroes, and I look at them and I go, how did they do that in the midst of that? Because if they can do it in the midst of that, then we can do it in the midst of anything, right? So we gotta take a look at, for me, that's what I did this week, is just kept taking a look at what it was, where is that essence of high quality? And I found it in all these really funny things. I found it in cuddling. Not just with my wife, but with my dog. Did you think I was going somewhere else with that? No. I like living. I think I've told you this before, but I have green tea every morning. I've had it every morning for about 25 years. And that first sip is the highest quality of life I can imagine. Just sitting there, and it's just like, oh, that is the beginning of my day. Now, I actually start before that, but it's when I got that first sip that I'm like, yes, this is quality. A sunset. Being up here with you guys, I was saying this yesterday, that for me, being up here, getting to speak to you about what's been going on for me, this is, for me, self-care. That I actually get to share what goes on for me. This is self-care. For some singers, self-care is being able to get up and sing. right? This is high quality that I get to be here. This is part, when I get together, by the way, because I'm managing less, I have way more time for coffee dates and walks and things of that nature. So please call me because I love doing that. It's a high quality of life for me that I get together with you guys, right? That we get to spend time, quality time. Ash will tell you one of my love languages is quality time. And I get to experience that being here with you. Not just on Sundays, but when we get together outside Sundays. Quality time. That gives me a high quality of life, is when I feel fulfilled with those love languages that matter to me. So I highly recommend knowing, what is your love language? There's that great book, what's it called? The 5 Love Languages? I got that right? You want to look into that book just to discover for yourself what are your love languages, because that will support you in getting a higher quality of life. It has me. It has Ash. We go dive into that. We know that. It builds on the qualities. And then we make sure that we're fulfilled that way. A really interesting word that I hear a lot is the word need. Right? I was having a conversation about compassionate communication, and they were talking about discovering the other person's need. But in fact, the real deal is discovering what is essential in that need and how do we fulfill that in life itself. Right? Because a lot of times somebody will say they need something, and if you ask them, well, if you had that, what would it give you? Right? An example was, and I've given this example before, I know, was somebody coming to me and saying, I need a new car. And I said, well, if you had a new car, what would that give you? Well, if I have a new car, I can get to work. Well, if you get to work, what would that give you? Well, if I got to be able to get to work, I get to keep my job. I get to get paid. I get to have money and pay for all the things I need to get paid for. And then I said, well, if you get to keep your job and you get money and you get all these things that you think you need to have it get paid for, what would that give you? And they said, security and safety. And I get an appreciation for myself and how I'm being. Well, how about we just treat for that? Because who knows how that can show up. Let's just treat for you feeling appreciated and safe, and then letting life move for you. I had another discussion with somebody this week where we talked about how they were chasing life. And once you get really clear on who you are, life starts chasing you. The more solid you get into yourself, that doesn't mean you don't take any action to create it and be with it, right? But you don't have to chase it. I do not chase life anymore. I used to. But now I spend my time getting so grounded in me and who I am that I notice that life shifts to fit that. Shows up that way. And then I recognize it, and it was like, again, it's always like being here. I've never felt myself more myself than being here with you. And it's an incredible feeling of freedom and safety and wonder and awe when you're deep inside who you are. This is why we teach these classes. This is why I speak about this stuff on Sunday. I want you to experience this in your life, the fullness of who you are, and watch how life actually shifts for you. Instead of you having to constantly feel like you got to shift yourself out of shape for life. It's really not true. It doesn't work that way. We're more powerful than that. We are powerful, creative, spiritual beings. I say that every week. Life actually can shift to our way of being in the world when we are solid in who we are and what our contribution in life is. Right? Once I got the idea that my contribution to life was simply being my authentic self, that was good enough. That was enough. I didn't have to be more than that. I didn't have to be this or that. I just had to be my solid, authentic self, and that contributed to life. That's when things started to change. And that's when the essential comes forward as to, do I really need this? Or is it really about this? What is the essential in it? So when you think you need something, ask yourself, what's the essential in it? What's really in there? When you're feeling unappreciated or unloved, wonder, how are you doing that with yourself? How are you loving yourself? How are you appreciating yourself? Because the world is only going to show you the amount of appreciation that you can show yourself. And even if they showed you more, you wouldn't see it. So more you can open to yourself and your own way of being, that's the quality of life I imagine for all of us, right? That quality of life of feeling loved, supported, appreciated, our needs met from the essential. When we are there, life blossoms. There is awe. There is wonder in the littlest of things. That's what makes this such an extraordinary journey. That's what does it, is when we can look at that. At least that's what it looks like to me. I love you very much, and I know this for all of you.